Thank you, Mr. Metcalf. Are there any other speakers at this point? Mr. Wernberg.
Thank you for the extra opportunity. One of the things that has bothered me from the word go was the fact that the documents that were listed at the beginning of the meeting, from the staff report, I believe, did not include the Aurora Trails Master Plan. The master plan is a policy document. It went through the public planning stages and everything, and it has in it a provision that whenever possible we should be looking at off-road trails. And in this development, there's a grid trail running east-west through this whole development, and that seems to be forgotten about. Like, first of all, the document doesn't get quoted as relevant in this context, and secondly, the developer doesn't seem to be taken to task to justify why he doesn't follow the rule. I'm also perturbed by and this is another point, by the staff not putting their comments forward ahead of these meetings in such a way that the public can view these comments and have a look at the expertos sort of view of what is in front of you. I think that's the point of having staff. Parks and Recreation comes to mind naturally. They have yet to have public comments that I can look at, that I'm interested in, very interested in the context of what I'm proposing. Namely, I would like to see a linear park from end to end, meaning from Bathurst to Yonge Street. But Parks and Recreation people have not commented, for instance, on the advisability of allowing the developer to take pockets of buildable land that they can't use for anything, but take them as parkland dedication. They are equally unusable for us. They have no real value to us. They are generally between housing and restricted lands. They add acreage to the restricted lands. That's all they do, really. And they call them parkettes, and they're able to add up all these parkettes to account for parkland dedication. That is not what we are in business for. We would like to have the last word as to where we have this parkland dedication. What is the most usable form of parkland dedication that we can have? And in this case, I think we're looking at the linear park, the grand park that we could have here, where they should be incorporated. That it will not be enough to account for what I'm looking for, the greenways. Will take up more land than that. But we can, look at these things and then come up with creative ideas of maybe where we can, in the eastern section especially, create some extra lands to make this whole thing work, like to have a meaningful development and then reduce the houses. They will be reduced because if we have lots of extra parkland, which we need for a big park, then yes, we will have less houses. But we are having to make a deal with this development proposal in terms of they're getting all kinds of breaks under our planning legislation, and we are getting next to none. So I'm saying, thank you. We are in a position where we should be driving this thing and not be driven. And I'm taking exception to not having the reports, not having policies respected.
1 minute, Mr. Wernberg.
Yes, thank you. That is not what this thing is all about. I'm quite prepared to see some development go ahead, but not being dictated to and not having our staff produce meaningful reports before we can comment on this. We like to have the experts set out what they think about this, and we are not getting it. So, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wernberg. I'm going to ask our Director of Planning and Development Services to comment specifically to that, because as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, the process that we're going through now is very prescriptive, and it's prescriptive through the Planning Act, which is an act of the province of Ontario. So there's certain steps that we must follow. We cannot deviate from that. So I'm going to ask Mr. Ramuno to comment just on some of the process and a couple of the other items that we've heard so far this evening. Mr. Ramuno.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, with respect to the process, I mean, as we've heard, we're in the middle of the public planning process, and we're here to hear comments from the community. Staff from the various departments within the town are still evaluating all the reports that have been submitted, the technical reports submitted by the proponent. We have, as you've heard, we've received a majority of the external agency comments, such as the Conservation Authority and York Region's comments, but we also were directed to have third parties review much of the technical reports that were submitted, and those responses haven't been submitted yet. With respect to Mr. Wernberg's comments, I can assure you that our park staff and the rest of the planning staff and our engineering staff are reviewing the background reports. Specifically, our park staff is evaluating the proposal as it relates to our approved master parks plan, our trails plan, and all those various documents. So they are, again, as I said, evaluating those plans, and when we do have comments from the various departments, they will be brought forward to council for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. The other, I think, very important question that we've heard a couple of times, and it came up at the June 24th meeting as well, was how did we let it get this far? So the implication is how did council let this happen? That was the question, I think, the way it was phrased in June. The reality of the situation is that this is a private piece of land. The land was owned, by Clublink Corporation. They made a business decision, whether we agree or not, they made a business decision to change use, to sell it, and to submit an application to redevelop. They are perfectly entitled to do that. This process is for the community and for council to determine how we wish to deal with that. They have the right to do that just the same as everybody in this room who owns property has a right to go to, and madam, if you'd like to speak again, just whip over to Patty there and get your name on the list. Just as everybody in this room who owns a piece of property has every right to come to the town and apply whether you'd like to put in a pool or a deck, an addition, a big cabana. You have that right, and that comes to the town, and the town then goes through its process. That's how it got this far. Excuse me, I didn't interrupt anybody speaking. They have a right. Our obligation is to look at the plan, to analyze it, as Mr. Ramuno said. So, Mr. Ramuno, if I've said anything incorrect, if you could correct me, please.
No, to you, Mr. Mayor, you've explained the process correctly. We are obligated, if an applicant does bring forward a planning application under the Planning Act and under our own policies that speak to what is required for a landowner to submit an application, we are obligated to take those applications in and, as the mayor mentioned, conduct the proper public planning process, notify members of the public, ensure that the information is distributed, and evaluate those applications, and again, carry out a public planning process to receive input from the public.
Did you wish to come back to the microphone, madam?
It's Lorraine Cohen's again, and this might just be a snide remark, a little sarcastic, but if this proposal goes through and it's okay for someone who owns land to apply for changes to their property, perhaps I could solicit Tim Hortons or maybe a a nice gas station or something for my corner lot. It would be really convenient for all those living in my neighborhood.
Are there any other members of the public? Any other comments? Klaus?
I appreciate your remarks relative to the landowners' rights to come forward with a proposal to do something other than what they're using the land for now or what has been used for. And as you heard earlier on, I have accepted the fact that there will be some development. I'm looking for a better deal. And the deal is on the basis that the developer wants us to change a bunch of rules that are not the regular, that don't line up with his intentions. And therefore, we are in a position to negotiate a deal. And we should be making our voice heard. We should be asking for what we really want and try to accommodate that to the degree that it's possible. But we need to do this in a transparent way. So far, I haven't been able to, I have not been assisted by what has been on the table. There are some reports from the Conservation Authority even back in June. They're very technical. They're not written for a layperson. What I'm looking for is staff reports that lay out where the developer is asking for something that doesn't agree with us and what does agree with us, like what does agree with our rules, our planning documents, etc. And then we have all of these factors in front of us, and then we can expect maybe some comments from our politicians as to where they stand on this and how they view these expert inputs. And then we can maybe have a comeback from the public and let our politicians know what we think of their opinion, etc. That type of transparent process is not rolling off yet. We simply need to develop a different option. And if this goes to the OMB, and I understand the developer has the option of going to OMB now because the time has already run out for us to deal with this. No, if this goes to the OMB and there's a straight no to it, we don't have a chance. We're going to go the same road that Glenway went in Newmarket. If, however, we have an alternative proposal that has been well prepared, supported by staff and politicians, then I think we have a real chance in front of the OMB to fight this proposal. We need to get around to that. And that is basically where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Mr. Wernberg. I'll ask Mr. Given if he has any particular comments or responses that he would like to make at this point.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given the number of comments and questions that we've had put to us, I would like to respond to those in writing and make sure that they're available to you and to the residents in advance of the next public meeting so they can hear from us in a more fulsome way than I can do tonight. It does require me coordinating with all the other experts that we have here to make sure I get their positions properly expressed. But I would like to make a couple comments. First, I'd like to apologize to your lawyer. I did not mean to misstate the situation. I was really trying to capture the expression that he has given you of his opinion on the 1-foot reserves. That was the main thing that I wanted to raise. I did not want to make it appear that he has in some way not objected to this proposal. The other thing that I think we can clarify right away is that there's been concern about the tennis courts and the lighting. That was a proposal we had But we've pulled that from the table. If that's not what the municipality wants, we won't talk about it anymore. So that's not something that I think needs to be discussed much further. We thought it was a good idea. Obviously, some people think it isn't, and we're not prepared to go there anymore. In terms of the 6-meter wide pavement width that has been a concern, or has been expressed as a concern by some of the residents about how traffic will work, that is not an unusually narrow right-of-way, or sorry, pavement width. It's close to 20 feet in width. Typically, we work with about a 24-foot wide pavement width. 20 feet still gives you the room to handle traffic in both ways. We're not anticipating parking on the road. So, but a typical street allows a dual carriageway. Each carriageway is typically about 3-point-something meters, so we feel that we've got that covered, and that is only in a few sections that we have 6. Many of the other areas are going to be wider than that, but we're looking for a way to deal with the whole question about how do you get water into the ground. And one of the key things that we're trying to promote is minimize the amount of pavement surface so that we can use the grassed swales, use the boulevards to get water into the ground. It's a common... It is a common practice today.
Mr. Given, excuse me, I don't recall any of the proponent laughing or being rude when any member of the public was speaking. I think we should show these people the same consideration. Thank you. Mr. Given.
The measures that we are asking you to consider, which include that type of pavement treatment, are much broader, and they all are part of a whole discussion that's taking place with the Conservation Authority to deal with different ways to handle stormwater, so we don't have end-of-pipe solutions, which minimizes the amount of pond area that we require, minimizes the volume of discharge that's going down the streams during the peak period. So we think we're in sync with what the authority is looking for. In fact, we did this on a subdivision in Newmarket on the south side of Davis Drive over at Bathurst Street, and we won all kinds of awards for being out in front of the curve on that. So we're not proposing something here that we think should be offensive. It is different than previous practices, but we're being encouraged to move forward and do things differently. The balance of the comments, Your Worship, we will put in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Given. I'll go one last time to any members of the public who might have any comments. Okay, so I will open it up for comments from council at this point. If anybody would like to... Okay, just please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might suggest that before we go to members of council's comments, that we place before council the recommendation that's in the staff report to take those comments and refer them to staff.
One at a time. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Would someone please put that on the floor? Councillor Maracas, thank you. Councillor Abel. Then we'll go to comments and then move the motion later. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate the applicant coming forward, and I'm very much impressed and appreciative of all the residents coming out and being patient. I don't know that I can speak for all council, but we have been asked we've been asked to reserve any comment until this first process has come to this point. And so we don't want to appear indifferent or that we don't have a stand, but we do have our comments, and I believe we're going to be given that opportunity right now. First of all, my comments are this green space that we've enjoyed as a golf course is a heritage feature of our town from east to west. It's been there for 100 years. It's existed almost as long as our town has, and I think it's something that we should cherish. Secondly, I feel that this property has already been infilled once. So to come back and do it again, we have put measures in place under our official plan that we would like to be very much part of that, and it starts with the 1-foot buffer. And I believe it plays a role in considering any development application that comes forward. I would like to see this broken up into pieces. I would like to see, to start off, that there be a west part, an east part, and a condo. It's very difficult to address all my concerns in an overall, just as it's been very difficult for many of the residents, but I must compliment how articulate you have been in explaining your concerns. I would like to see options presented. I think there's some dialogue and room for that. I really am not going to comment further whether that I will not approve any application until we have seen all the concerns addressed. And right now, they have not been addressed. So there's a long way to go before anything can be approved, but the way I see it as it is, I cannot support it, and will not. And I think based on time, I will allow all the other councillors to have their say.
I could just go down the line, or I can just let you put your hand up. Councillor Thompson, would you care to? And then Councillor Humphreys.
To you, Mr. Mayor, and to the community that's here tonight and coming out and spending so much of your time, the passion and love for the area is evident. I lived on golf links. I moved in 2011. I love that street. I see some of my neighbors here that we're still very good friends with. So I know how you're feeling and the passion. And from my perspective, there's a lot of work still to be done. Typically, from my experience on council, that after a meeting like this, every one of your concerns are documented and there's a response provided through our professionals in the staff department. We get that information and we analyze it. I also would love to see the residents and the ratepayers group working very closely with the developer on all your concerns. I know that the ratepayers group mentioned this evening that you're waiting for a staff report with opinions from the professionals in engineering and the environment and so on. I think that's a good thing to do, but I also feel, you know, if you can, keep expressing your concerns to the people who are interested in developing in our community. They have to listen, and I hope that that will develop in a partnership. You heard from a very strong individual this evening, Susan Walmer, who has done a great job in our community to ensure that development is done appropriately and existing in our areas, and has done a wonderful job on the south end of town. So use those great resources. Some of the great information here this evening from a scientific perspective. You know, you have the ability to continue to impact. We're listening. I'm listening to every word, and I'm looking forward to this process to go forward to hopefully have what we all can, you know, be happy with. And at this point, I don't know how we can say this is okay. We can't. We don't have the information in front of us to make those calls and those decisions. So I'm looking forward to a lot more of the community working with the development team through the ratepayers group and working with staff. Keep letting us know how you feel. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to make the decision that we all have to, you know, can live with together. And our prime goal is listening to the residents. That's why we're here. You're articulating how you feel, and we're taking it to heart, written down everything here this evening. And I'll remember each and every one of these comments as we move through the program.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Much has been said tonight, but I do want to thank everybody for coming out and for all those residents that have been engaged in the process and sending in their comments. At the end of the day, it's our community. We're all involved in it. And the public planning process really is such that it affords you that opportunity to have a say in how your community grows and develops. And we're trying to afford you as much opportunity to share your concerns and your suggestions. And Tonight, as well as back in June, we've heard many of those, and they're valid. And we've heard suggestions on how to enhance it, if it should go forward, but more importantly, we've heard your concerns and how we should be addressing it. I share some of those concerns. You know, we've heard tonight many of them. We've seen some in the reports, both around the pre and post construction and how that impacts your daily lives. But we've also heard different pieces that need to be considered. For myself and my time on council, I mean, this is the largest and most complex plan that's been brought before it, and I kind of look at it like a jigsaw puzzle. And for me, some of those pieces don't fit. You know, we've heard many different pieces, but you know, tonight one of the ones that does stand out for me is the condominium development. I'm not in agreement that it be 10 stories. I'm not in agreement that it have a commercial component. I think that does impact the neighborhood significantly. And so those policies that we've addressed and developed in terms of stable neighborhoods are essential. You know, it's, yes, we have a provincial mandate to accommodate growth, but at the same time, we also have a responsibility to you to make sure that your quality of life is not impacted, and we're trying to find that balance. And so I appreciate you keep coming out and giving us your concerns and comments and encourage that. I think that from what I've heard, and I'm sure what I'll hear around the table, it's evident that there's still some more work to be done to address those concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all the residents for coming out. A lot of what I was going to say has been said already, but I don't mind repeating it. I'll just start going down the list of the notes that I prepared, some of which I prepared before this evening, some of which I prepared from the diligent work that a lot of the residents have done in researching this project. So I'd like to see an itemized list of the site-specific bylaw exemptions that this application is asking for. I know one of the site-specific bylaw exemptions they're asking for is the height of the condo building, which I agree with Councillor Thompson is not compatible with this area of our community. I also have a problem with the commercial at grade on the condo building. I don't believe that that fits in with our neighborhood at that part of town. And with I'd like to have questions answered on the on-site and off-site parking that one of the residents, I believe the board member from the adjacent condo building, has raised. I think that's extremely important, and I'd like to see those concerns addressed at the next meeting. I, like Councillor Abel, would also like to see this application, if possible, split into a more manageable size for council. Councillor Thompson made a good point. It's a jigsaw puzzle, and as he aptly pointed out, many of those pieces don't fit. So that's something that I'd like to see. It is, I believe it's within our purview to do so or to ask for that. So I believe that is a reasonable request by council to see if that application can be split so that the concerns from both residents, council can be addressed in a more manageable way. I mentioned earlier about the condo size. I have concerns with the density of some of the proposed streets. The gentleman, I believe he was the newest resident of the neighborhood. He lives at Kennedy and George Street. If you look at the map, Kennedy and George continues on, and George Street ends at the golf course. As he mentioned, they're half-acre plots, a couple $1 million home, and the street then continues on with densities that don't match. So that density matches streets that it's not adjacent to the. It's adjacent to those properties, but it's not a continuation of George Street. So I'd like to see that addressed perhaps at the next public meeting. I've also taken the opportunity in the lead up to this process and during this process to visit a number of residents, and I've been lucky enough and blessed to be able to be invited into their homes to hear their concerns. And one very specific one, but I'll speak about it more broadly, is the difference in grading and site grading. In one specific instance on Marsh Harbor, the difference in grading from the house that I was at to the proposed cul-de-sac in their backyard, or just outside of their backyard, was 8 meters, an 8 meters difference in grading. I was informed today that there's going to be some regrading. The plan speaks to regrading. I think that's fine, but unless an 8-meter regrade seems to me like it's impossible. So I'd like to see the issues of grading differences between existing homes and proposed streets addressed. And in numerous points on the plan, I won't get into specifics and I don't want to take up too much more time, the single loaded roads to me are incompatible. In some instances you have single loaded road with almost nothing on either side but existing houses. And that might be 6-meter wide road. It might be smaller, it might be bigger, but to me it's shoehorning in roads to me where they don't seem to be compatible. I think that there is a responsible way forward for this application. I do think that there is some appropriate areas for development. I think that, as Councillor Abel mentioned, we can use the 1-foot reserves to make sure that we responsibly develop this area, and not just throw away our natural inheritance. And I do firmly believe that there are areas that can be developed that once were the Highland Gate Golf Course, but as it stands now, I would like to see a plan that comes back to the town that addresses the concerns not only of this council, but of the residents here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. I'll go to Councillor Kim, then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I feel like Bobby Ewing in Dallas in the last shower scene. I wish this never happened and it was a dream. But you know, I wish Club Link was successful. I wish the golfers were still there golfing. I wish that everyone was happy. But we do know that we have this situation in front of us, and I didn't walk the course, but a few weeks ago I did bike the course very slowly because it was kind of wet. But and it's a beautiful piece of land, and you know it's painful to consider what it would look like if it was built up. But at the same time, I do acknowledge the fact that it's not our property. Someone does own it, and they do have rights as well. And in as much as I try to be emotional about and heartfelt about the property, I know that we have to stick with the technicalities and look at all the reports. And certainly all the reports that we get, this project is guided, as Councillor Thompson said, by so many different guidelines, whether it be the provincial policy statement, Oak Ridge's moraine, the official plan. There's so many moving parts here, or maybe they're not so moving, and we just have to ensure that they're all aligned. And it's very complex. But when I do my research, a lot of the successful communities, that infills or otherwise, the successful ones was built on the foundation of cooperation. And it is my hope that there is some common ground here that both sides can agree upon. And I think the last few months, I am disappointed that Geranium hasn't come a little bit closer. There's still time, and I'm hopeful that some of the concerns that's been raised in the last two meetings would be met. I think I share many similar views as those who have already spoken here on council, but I do hope that there's cooperation, and I do know that both sides do have their rights, and I just hope that we can clarify what those rights are and relative to all the guidelines that are before us, but I do hope that there's cooperation in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that politicians are elected to represent their voters to protect their interests, to take care of their community. I've been listening to you, and I believe that I have heard you.
Councilor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and showing the passion of this community. It's great. My concerns lie a lot with our official plan and the guidelines and policies that we set forth as a community. To me, I look at this application that's before us and it does not follow our official plan. To me, it's not compatible. It doesn't fit within our community. It doesn't fit within the guidelines and principles that we set forth. We spend a lot of time and effort as a council and as a community setting forth the designs and principles that we expect within our community. And for me, it's that fit. And this development just does not fit in its current state. It's my hope that the proponent goes back, takes a hard look at the development that they're proposing and takes the comments and concerns that they've heard from council, from the residents, and they come back with a proposal at that October 28th meeting that fits within our official plan and our guidelines. Thank you.
Councilor Perry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess first I'd say that I'd like Councillor Kim to explain to me that Dallas reference. Councillor Tom as well. It went over our heads. We're not sure what that meant. I do truly appreciate everybody coming out here tonight. When I was going around during the election campaign and people talked about the potential for this development, I said that our best bet as a municipality to try and stop any and all development was wait for the property to come up for sale and try and put in a bid in some capacity. Unfortunately, the property never came up for sale, and the owners of the property do have the right to develop their property to some extent. I don't want to give the residents here tonight the belief that they don't have that right, but I do agree that we need to find something that fits within the fabric of our community. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, if possible, with regards to the height of the condo and the condo specifically, is that something that's going to be dealt with through this process, or is that something that's more dealt with through the site plan process later on down the road?